For decades, Bigfoot has occupied a strange space in American culture, too widely reported to dismiss entirely, and too elusive to confirm scientifically. Thousands of sightings across North America, countless blurry photographs, plaster casts of enormous footprints, audio recordings of bone-chilling screams echoing through remote forests. And always the same response from mainstream science: misidentification, hoaxes, or the human tendency to see patterns where none exist. Bears standing upright, shadows in the forest, overactive imaginations. But what if the skeptics are wrong? What if something genuinely unknown is living in North America's vast wilderness? Something intelligent enough to avoid detection, large enough to inspire terror, and real enough that the evidence keeps accumulating despite decades of dismissal. In 2012, a trail camera in Alberta, Canada, captured footage so disturbing that 3 wildlife biologists who analyzed it reportedly resigned from the review team rather than sign a report explaining what the camera recorded. The footage shows a massive reddish-brown figure with a cone-shaped head and impossibly broad shoulders sitting in a forest clearing in broad daylight, behaving in ways that do not match any known North American species. That footage, along with several other recent encounters documented through cameras, photographs, and credible eyewitness accounts, has forced even skeptical researchers to reconsider whether Bigfoot might be more than folklore. The evidence is not just accumulating, it is becoming harder to explain away. This is the story of the most convincing Bigfoot evidence ever recorded. Evidence that has left experts shocked, frightened, and unable to provide conventional explanations. Evidence that suggests something massive and intelligent is living in North American forests, watching humans from the shadows, and avoiding detection through behaviors that look less like animal instinct and more like strategic intelligence. The fundamental problem with most cryptid evidence is that genuinely elusive creatures should almost never be captured on camera in clear, well-lit conditions. If Bigfoot exists, it has survived for centuries or millennia in increasingly human-dominated landscapes by being extraordinarily good at staying hidden. We should expect evidence of Bigfoot to be fleeting glimpses rather than prolonged observations, recorded accidentally rather than through deliberate searches, ambiguous enough to create debate, but compelling enough to resist easy dismissal, consistent across independent witnesses who have no contact with each other. And that's exactly the pattern we see in the most convincing recent cases. Not hunters deliberately searching for Bigfoot and returning with perfect high-definition footage. Those are almost always hoaxes. Instead, hikers reviewing footage hours later and discovering they were not alone. Trail cameras positioned for wildlife monitoring capturing something that does not match any cataloged species. Witnesses encountering something so shocking they remain traumatized years later. These cases share several features that distinguish them from obvious hoaxes or misidentifications. Geographic isolation. The encounters occur in extremely remote areas, far from roads, requiring hours of hiking through difficult terrain to reach. Hoaxers rarely commit to this level of effort. Accidental discovery. The observers were not searching for Bigfoot. They were hunting, hiking, or conducting wildlife surveys. The creature appeared unexpectedly, often not noticed until footage was reviewed later. Behavioral complexity. The figures do not just appear and disappear. They exhibit strategic behavior, hiding behind vegetation, watching from cover, moving deliberately, and apparently assessing threats before reacting. Across independent cases, descriptions are remarkably consistent. They describe massive figures, 7 to 9 feet tall, walking on 2 legs, with cone-shaped or domed heads, impossibly broad shoulders, dark fur, and human-like but distinctly non-human proportions. Wildlife biologists, forest rangers, and other seasoned professionals who have extensive experience identifying animals cannot explain what they are seeing with any known species. Let's examine the specific cases that have shocked experts and that resist conventional explanation. In 2018, a YouTuber documenting wilderness survival techniques was hiking through a remote forest in the Pacific Northwest. He has never publicly specified the exact location, citing concerns about disturbing the area and attracting trophy hunters. The hiker was miles from any trail, in terrain so difficult he was using climbing equipment to navigate steep sections. He noticed signs that made him uncomfortable, including trees with bark stripped at heights that exceed what bears typically reach, a pervasive smell he described as like wet dog mixed with rotten meat, and complete silence, no bird calls, and no insect sounds, the kind of quiet that indicates a large predator is present. He filmed himself discussing these observations, then continued hiking while his camera recorded continuously. It was not until he reviewed the footage that evening that he noticed something shocking. Approximately 40 yards behind him, partially concealed by vegetation and shadow, a large dark figure appeared to be crouching, watching him as he passed. Frame-by-frame analysis of the footage shows a massive form, dark-colored, that does not match the surrounding vegetation, what appears to be a head turning to track the hiker's movement, shoulders significantly broader than any human. The figure remained stationary for several seconds, then appeared to shift position as the hiker moved away. The hiker's first assumption was that another person was in the area. The location was so remote that encountering another human would have been remarkable in itself. The proportions visible in the footage do not match a human. The shoulder width relative to head size is far too great. Wildlife experts who have reviewed the footage note several details that make conventional explanation difficult. The behavior is inconsistent with bears. Black bears occasionally stand on their hind legs, but they do not crouch in vegetation and watch humans pass. The figure's stillness and apparent focus on the hiker suggest purposeful observation rather than coincidental presence. The proportions do not match known apes. Gorillas have massive shoulders, but they are not native to North America and do not live in temperate forests. The cone-shaped head visible in some frames resembles a sagittal crest, a bony ridge seen in male gorillas, yet it is present on a creature living in an environment where gorillas could not survive. The location makes hoaxing implausible. To stage this footage, someone would need to hike miles into the wilderness carrying a costume, wait in vegetation in a precise spot where the hiker would pass, remain completely silent and still during filming, then exit without leaving obvious tracks. The effort required makes hoaxing less plausible than a genuine encounter. The hiker reported feeling watched throughout the hike, long before he reviewed the footage and saw the figure. This subjective awareness, combined with the predator signs he observed, suggests he was correct. Something was tracking him through the forest, staying out of direct sight but maintaining observation. In 2019, 2 experienced mountaineers attempting a technical climb in the Himalayas captured video footage that has generated intense debate in both the cryptozoology and mainstream zoology communities. The climbers were above 18,000 feet elevation, in conditions where temperatures drop below zero even in summer. Oxygen levels are roughly half of sea level, and most mammals cannot survive for extended periods. Humans require supplemental oxygen, specialized equipment, and extreme acclimatization to function in these conditions. While setting up camp, one climber filmed what he initially thought was another climbing team in the distance. But as he zoomed in with his camera, he realized the figure was not wearing climbing gear. It was moving on 2 legs through snow and ice, covered in what appeared to be thick, dark fur, and navigating terrain that would require technical skill for a human to cross. The footage shows about 15 seconds of the figure moving across a snowfield before disappearing behind a rock formation. Analysis of the video reveals size inconsistent with known species. Comparing the figure to rock formations of known size in the background suggests a creature approximately 7 to 8 feet tall, far larger than any human. The estimate of 7 to 8 feet is striking. Bipedal locomotion, the creature walks upright on 2 legs with a stride that looks purposeful and controlled, not the awkward gait of a bear on hind legs. This bipedal movement is notable. Adaptation to extreme altitude, the figure moves with apparent ease in conditions that exhaust even experienced mountaineers. Whatever it is thoroughly adapted to high-altitude survival. Fur-covered body, the dark coloration and texture visible in the footage suggests thick fur covering the entire body, necessary insulation for surviving Himalayan conditions. The fur-covered appearance stands out. Sherpa guides who reviewed the footage identified it as consistent with yeti, the Himalayan equivalent of North America's Bigfoot. Significantly, Sherpas do not treat yeti as myth or folklore. They regard it as a real but rare creature that inhabits remote high-altitude regions and is occasionally encountered by climbers who venture into its territory. "We know yeti exists," one Sherpa guide stated in an interview. "It is not a question for us. The question is whether outsiders will believe because they think mountains this high and cold cannot support large mammals. But yeti has lived here for as long as our people have known these mountains." The Himalayan footage is significant because it demonstrates that large bipedal cryptid reports are not limited to North American forests. Similar creatures are reported from the Himalayas, Russia, Australia, and other remote regions worldwide. Either these are all separate species that evolve similar features independently, or there is a relict population of unknown hominids that has survived in isolated pockets across multiple continents. In 2016, an experienced elk hunter was camping in a remote section of the Oregon Cascades, miles from the nearest road or trail. He had been hunting the area for over a decade and knew the terrain intimately. On his second night in camp, while sitting by a small fire after dark, he heard something massive moving through the forest approximately 100 yards away. Branches breaking, heavy footfalls that did not match the light step of deer or elk. Then, without warning, a rock the size of a softball crashed into trees near his campsite. The hunter estimated the rock weighed 20 to 25 pounds based on the impact sound and the damage to the tree it struck. Rock throwing is a behavior consistently reported in Bigfoot encounters. Witnesses describe rocks being hurled from darkness with surprising accuracy, sometimes striking close to campers, sometimes hitting tents or vehicles. The behavior appears deliberate, not aggressive enough to cause serious harm, but threatening enough to communicate a clear message to leave the area. The hunter remained by his fire, rifle ready, listening to continued movement in the surrounding forest. Whatever was out there circled his camp several times over the course of an hour, staying just beyond the range of his flashlight before finally moving away. At first light, he investigated and found massive footprints, humanoid in shape, approximately 17 inches long and 8 inches wide. They show 5 toes and a distinctive mid-tarsal break, a flexible arch that humans do not possess, but that would allow a heavy bipedal creature to walk more efficiently. A clear track line. The prints led from the direction where the rock had been thrown, circled the camp at approximately 75 to 100 yards, then headed deeper into the wilderness following a game trail used by deer. Evidence of a recent deer kill. About 200 yards from camp, the hunter found the remains of a deer with injuries inconsistent with predation by known species, not the bite patterns of cougars or coyotes, but rather trauma consistent with being struck with tremendous force. The hunter reported the incident to the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. Officials visited the site and photographed the footprints, but offered no official explanation. The hunter, who wishes to remain anonymous, has not returned to that section of forest. "I've hunted dangerous game on 3 continents," he stated in one interview. "I've had bears near my camp, I've had mountain lions stalk me. This was different. Whatever was out there was assessing me. It wasn't random animal behavior, it was strategic. It knew I was armed, it maintained distance, but it wanted me to know it was there." That's the kind of behavior you see from intelligent hunters, not from animals operating on instinct. The centerpiece of recent Bigfoot evidence is footage captured by a trail camera in Alberta, Canada in 2012. The camera was positioned by wildlife biologists conducting a survey of predator populations in remote wilderness. When researchers retrieved the camera 6 months later and reviewed thousands of images showing bears, wolves, deer, and other known species, they found several frames that showed something else. Something that 3 wildlife biologists who analyzed the footage could not explain and refused to sign a final report about. The images show a massive creature sitting in a forest clearing in afternoon sunlight. Unlike most Bigfoot evidence, this was not a fleeting glimpse or ambiguous shadow. The creature was stationary for several seconds, resulting in multiple clear frames. details visible in the footage. Reddish-brown coloration. The creature is covered in fur that appears coppery or rust-colored, distinct from the darker browns of black bears common in the region. Cone-shaped head. The skull shows a prominent sagittal crest, a bony ridge running from front to back of the skull, similar to what is seen in male gorillas, and which provides attachment points for massive jaw muscles. Extremely broad shoulders. The shoulder width is approximately twice what would be expected for a human of comparable height, suggesting immense upper body strength. Human-like posture. The creature sits upright with its back straight and legs extended forward, a posture not typical of bears or other quadrupedal mammals. Proportions inconsistent with bears. Bears sitting on their haunches have different body proportions, shorter arms, thicker torsos, heads that sit directly on shoulders without visible neck. This creature shows a body plan closer to human or ape proportions, but at massive scale. The most controversial aspect of this footage is the alleged reaction of the review team. According to sources close to the project, 3 wildlife biologists with decades of combined experience reviewing trail camera footage could not identify the creature using standard taxonomic references. When pressed to provide an official identification for the final report, they declined, with one biologist stating, "I can tell you what it isn't. It's not a bear, not a person in a suit, not any animal I'm familiar with. But I won't speculate in an official report about what it might be, because that speculation could destroy my professional credibility." The 3 biologists left the project shortly after, and the final report was completed by different personnel who classified the images as unidentified large mammal without further analysis. This reluctance to engage with anomalous evidence is common among wildlife professionals. Academic and professional careers depend on maintaining credibility within scientific consensus. Publicly suggesting that Bigfoot might be real, or even just acknowledging that evidence exists, which is difficult to explain, can result in professional marginalization, ridicule, and loss of funding or positions. So instead, experts often choose silence. They see evidence they can't explain, acknowledge privately that it's unusual, but refuse to go on record with conclusions that would invite controversy. In 2020, a solo hiker was taking a water break on a fallen log in dense forest in Northern California when he saw something that he initially thought was another hiker approximately 60 feet away. Then he realized the figure was far too large to be human, and it was covered in black fur. The hiker froze. The creature, standing between 2 trees and partially obscured by undergrowth, turned its head and locked eye contact with him. According to the witness, the eye contact lasted approximately 5 to 10 seconds, though fear makes time estimation unreliable. The creature did not flee. Instead, it slowly stepped backward behind a tree, keeping its head visible, watching the hiker from partial cover. The hiker slowly stood, picked up his pack, and backed away while facing the creature. Only when he had put significant distance between himself and the figure did he turn and run back to the trailhead. What makes this encounter particularly significant is the creature's behavior. It did not flee immediately upon being seen, which is the typical prey animal response. Charge or display aggression, which is the typical territorial or predatory response. Ignore the human presence, which is the typical wild animal attempt to avoid conflict. Instead, it assessed the situation, determined the human was not an immediate threat, and maintained visual contact while moving to a defensive position behind cover. This is intelligent, tactical behavior, and it suggests the creature was making decisions based on evaluating risk rather than reacting on instinct. The hiker reported the encounter to local authorities and described symptoms consistent with traumatic stress, including difficulty sleeping, intrusive memories, and reluctance to return to wilderness areas where he had previously felt comfortable. This psychological response is common in witnesses who have had close encounters with large unknown animals. The experience triggers primal fear responses related to encountering apex predators, something humans rarely experience in modern life. In 2017, a 15-year-old boy was gathering firewood near a remote family cabin in northern Michigan when he saw movement behind a large pine tree approximately 30 feet away. A massive figure, covered in dark brown fur and standing upright on 2 legs, rose from behind the tree up to full height. The boy estimates it stood 8 to 9 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they extended beyond the tree trunk that had been concealing it. The creature and the teenager made eye contact. Then the creature opened its mouth and produced a sound the boy described as like a scream mixed with a roar, louder than anything he had ever heard, coming from deeper in the chest than should be possible. The boy fumbled for his phone and managed to photograph the creature as it turned away. The resulting image is blurred, partially from camera shake caused by the boy's trembling hands, and partially from the creature's rapid movement, but it shows a large bipedal figure covered in dark fur turning away from the camera with one arm visible. The boy ran back to the cabin, where his parents confirmed he was pale, shaking, and seemed to be in shock. The family left the cabin immediately and did not return for the rest of that season. The photograph has been analyzed by multiple experts with mixed conclusions. Some argue the blur indicates a person in a suit. Others note that the proportions visible in the image show arm length and shoulder width inconsistent with human anatomy. The dense fur visible in parts of the image does not match commercially available costume materials. What is inarguable is that something frightened a teenage boy badly enough that he remained traumatized weeks later, and that his entire family abandoned their cabin rather than risk another encounter. Perhaps the most psychologically disturbing type of Bigfoot evidence involves the unwanted companion phenomenon, discovering after the fact that you were being followed or observed during wilderness activities without being aware of it at the time. In 2021, a man hiking alone in Washington state recorded continuous video while walking through dense forest. He narrated observations about the terrain, discussed plants he encountered, and was creating content for a wilderness survival channel. When he reviewed the footage that evening, he discovered something shocking. In multiple shots over a period spanning nearly an hour, a large dark figure appears in the background, partially obscured by vegetation, apparently following him at a consistent distance. The figure appears in 3 separate clips. At 12 minutes, barely visible between trees approximately 50 yards behind the hiker. At 38 minutes closer now, perhaps 30 yards away, moving from one patch of cover to another. At 54 minutes, visible at the edge of the frame, appearing to crouch behind fallen logs. The hiker had no awareness at the time that anything was following him. He heard nothing, sensed nothing, saw nothing. Whatever was back there was moving silently through underbrush, maintaining distance, apparently tracking him through the forest. The experience left him feeling violated and unsafe. When experts analyzed the footage, they noted several details. The figure's size remains consistent across frames, allowing for a rough estimation of 7 to 8 feet in height. The figure moves deliberately rather than randomly, suggesting purposeful tracking. The figure uses available cover strategically, staying behind vegetation that partially conceals it. The figure appears to move when the hiker is facing away or distracted, and it freezes when the hiker turns in its direction. This is stalking behavior. It demonstrates intelligence, patience, and an understanding of how to remain undetected. Qualities that suggest this is not random animal activity, but deliberate observation. The psychological impact of discovering you were being followed without knowing it is profound. The hiker reported feeling violated, unsafe, and questioning whether he had been followed during other wilderness trips without detecting it. He asked in a follow-up video, "How many times have I been alone in the forest and actually was not alone? How often is something back there watching, and we just do not know?" When you examine the most convincing Bigfoot evidence collectively, not individual ambiguous cases, but the entire pattern of reports, behaviors, and physical evidence, several conclusions become difficult to avoid. Something large and bipedal lives in North American forests. The consistency of descriptions across thousands of independent witnesses, many of whom had no prior knowledge of Bigfoot and no reason to fabricate stories, suggests genuine encounters with an unknown species. The creature is intelligent and deliberately avoids humans. It is not accidentally staying hidden, it employs strategies to avoid detection. using cover, tracking humans from distance, assessing threats, and withdrawing before definitive photography can be achieved, indicate behavioral sophistication beyond typical wildlife. The creature is rare. Low population density explains why bodies or bones are rarely found. In vast wilderness areas spanning millions of acres, even a population of several thousand individuals would have extremely low density and minimal chance of dying in locations where remains would be discovered. The creature is likely an unknown great ape or relict hominid. The physical descriptions, footprints showing dermal ridges and anatomical features consistent with primates, and observed behaviors all point to an ape or ape-like creature, rather than an undiscovered bear species or other mammal. Institutional science is reluctant to engage. The stigma associated with Bigfoot research prevents serious scientific investigation. Experts who see compelling evidence often choose silence over career-damaging speculation, creating a situation where evidence accumulates but is never formally investigated by mainstream institutions. The most convincing Bigfoot evidence has experts shocked, not because it provides definitive proof. No single piece of evidence is incontrovertible, but because collectively it is becoming harder to dismiss. Trail camera footage from Alberta, the Himalayan video, photographs, footprint casts showing dermal ridges, audio recordings, and thousands of credible witness accounts, all of it points in the same direction. We are left with two stark possibilities. Either we are witnessing the most successful, widespread, multi-generational hoax in history, involving thousands of independent hoaxers across multiple continents who somehow coordinate their descriptions and behaviors. Or something genuinely unknown is living in Earth's remaining wilderness areas, something massive, intelligent, and extraordinarily good at avoiding detection. Bigfoot was never just a legend. It was always there in the forests, watching from shadows, staying just out of clear sight. The evidence has always existed. Indigenous peoples have known about it for generations, describing creatures whose accounts match modern Bigfoot reports with remarkable precision. We are only now catching glimpses through modern technology, including trail cameras, high-resolution video, and enhanced photographic analysis. These tools make accidental documentation more likely, even as the creature continues avoiding deliberate search. Experts are shocked because the evidence is mounting and the explanations are failing. How many biologists need to refuse to sign reports? How many witnesses need to come forward with consistent descriptions? How much footage needs to accumulate before skepticism becomes denial? The quiet forests are not empty. Something intelligent is out there, watching. And perhaps the most terrifying realization is not that Bigfoot might be real, it is that hikers, campers, and wilderness travelers have been sharing the forest with these creatures for generations. Walking within yards of them, being observed and tracked, completely unaware that they were never actually alone. The evidence is shocking because it suggests that reality, that the wilderness many people consider their refuge and escape from civilization, is actually someone else's territory. They have been tolerating our presence, watching from cover, allowing us to believe we are alone when we never were. That is what the most convincing Bigfoot evidence reveals. And that is why experts who see it are shocked, not by supernatural monsters or impossible creatures, but by the possibility that something massive and intelligent has been hiding in plain sight all along, and we are only now beginning to notice.